Right now on Upfront.
Voucher fight.
I have major concerns.
One of the architects of the first voucher schools in Milwaukee, Dr. Howard Fuller, the focus of a new documentary. And now he's with us. His legacy in the fight over school choice today.
Man, you in these rooms, don't just be in here. Be in here and do something,
And the film's producer, a familiar face, now Mike Gousha, returns to the Upfront set for the first time since his final broadcast. His new project, the impact of the film, and what's new. We'll catch up from the other side of the desk.
Undecided.
So there's a lot of information that voters haven't tuned into.
Wisconsin voters uncommitted in the key races for governor and state Supreme Court. Marquette Law School poll director Charles Franklin with the new numbers. Plus, Vice President J.D. Vance in Wisconsin and our question to him.
And state of manufacturing.
But here's one thing that we do know. The president likes tariffs.
The head of the National Association of Manufacturers in Wisconsin and talking with us.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. A big moment here today. Mike Gousha returning to the Upfront studios for the first time since signing off this broadcast. We'll catch up with him in just a moment.
Mike is out with a new documentary on the life and legacy of Dr. Howard Fuller, the former Milwaukee Public School superintendent who transformed the world of education and still is. Fuller helped launch the first school choice program right here in Milwaukee. And today, the debate over taxpayer-funded vouchers is greater than ever.
I'll have an extended interview with Senator Ron Johnson tonight. A crowdfunding.
Former Upfront host Mike Gousha spent years in front of the camera.
This is a film about the life of Dr. Fuller.
Now he's moved behind the lens as a producer of a new documentary about one of Milwaukee's greatest change makers, Dr. Howard Fuller. Why was this an important project for you to be a part of right now?
I've always thought that Dr. Fuller is one of the more compelling public figures I've met as a journalist.
A Fuller Education documents Dr. Fuller's early years, from attending Milwaukee's North Division High School to becoming the first black student at Carroll College.
Howard Fuller and Ben Ruffin both are trying to hold the crowd back.
To his years in North Carolina, where he worked as an organizer and founded Malcolm X Liberation University.
It's going to be the ballot or the bullet.
Named in honor of one of his greatest inspirations.
The power of his words, the conviction of his words, the clarity of his words changed how I saw myself as a black person, as a black man, as a black human being.
How did you being the only in so many spaces kind of shape the philosophy on how you then tried to fight for change in the ways that you did?
I looked at it as I had this opportunity to be in rooms that people I cared about would never get into. That's the thing that always pushed me, right, is that, look, man, you in these rooms, don't just be in here and do something.
It's a philosophy Dr. Fuller leaned on when taking on what he calls the most crucial social justice issue of our time.
My name is Howard Fuller. We believe that the plan is blatantly racist, and it shows a complete lack of concern, not only for the needs of black students, but also for the needs and interests of the entire black community.
One of Dr. Fuller's greatest pursuits came in the early 90s, advocating for equal education for low and middle income families in Milwaukee.
We created the study commission back in 1985. It's when we first broke out all of the data by school, showing the racial gap in learning between black kids and white kids in every single school in the city of Milwaukee. Then for us, the next thing was, okay, you're not going to educate the kids. We can't create our own district. Give us a way out of here. Give us a way to try to create our own school.
That model would help create Milwaukee's parental choice program, the first of its kind in the nation. When you look at education, where it is today, what do you make of it?
Well, first of all, on the issue, I'll be very clear about this. I don't support school choice. I never have. I support parent choice. I did not get into this battle so that schools could choose kids. I got in it so that low-income and working-class parents would have the power that those of us who have money, and that is the power to choose the best educational environment for our kids. When I look around the country today, I have major concerns about some of the parent choice proposals because they're universal. Like, I never supported universal vouchers. I don't see why people with money should get more money. What I was trying to do was to try to make sure that low-income and working-class people were able to get resources that those of us with money already have. And I have a deep belief that when programs are developed that don't focus on the needs of the poorest people, they get lost in the shuffle, right? And so for me, that's a concern.
With that, let's bring in Mike Gousha, the film's producer. Mike, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to Upfront. It's really wonderful.
It's good to be back here, although it does feel a little strange to be on this side of the desk. So.
Only a few tough questions coming your way in a few minutes. Let's start, we're going to catch up in a second, but let's start where Howard left off, talking about this explosion of school choice across the country. I remember him referencing in the film that he somewhat anticipated from this first school to where we are today, this massive controversy. Is that a fair assumption of how he calculated what would come of all of this?
I think that is a fair assessment of it, because I think Howard even refers to it where there's a convergence, where people who may have very different views of the world come together on a particular issue to make common cause. And in this case, that happened. I mean, Howard has some of the most unlikely adversaries and some of the most unlikely allies in his support of parent choice. But as he pointed out in that interview, he is in a different place right now. He understands that the energy of the choice movement in many respects is toward universal vouchers, so income is not a problem. If you make a lot of money, you could still get a voucher. He is just fundamentally opposed to that and thinks that's sort of a betrayal of what he was talking about at the beginning.
Do you think he has any regrets?
No. Howard does not live with regrets. He told me the other day, I sleep well at night. I sleep well at night.
Yeah, in the documentary, we see the meeting that he had with President Bush, really highlighting Dr. Fuller's bipartisanship. How rare is that today, do you think?
I think it's unusual in today's world. You do not see many examples of that. I think Howard was somebody that the president wanted to talk to about education, and particularly urban education. And Howard had already developed a reputation as a strong national advocate for education reform. And so I think the former president just saw him as a resource. I should take advantage of this. And I think he also liked the fact that choice was, to a lot of Republicans, an appealing topic. And so while Howard may not have agreed with George W. Bush on any number of subjects, on this one, they did agree.
Yeah, what's your sense of how political Dr. Fuller is?
In the film, Alan Borsick, a longtime journalist in Milwaukee, says Howard is not a terribly political person. I think there's some truth to that. Howard does have political views. He is pretty outspoken about them in some cases. But I think and when it comes to education, he's willing to work with folks from different parts of the public sphere. And some people just have a hard time with that. That Howard would be, for example, a close personal friend of John Walton, the heir to the Walmart Foundation, the late heir to the Walmart Foundation. Howard worked with John Walton and was one of the few people who even gave a eulogy at his funeral. There are some people who just have a hard time with that. They feel like Howard somehow is, the Washington Post had a headline, is he a tool of corporate billionaires? Howard did not like that. And he said, you know, why am I a tool? If this guy is willing to help kids here in Milwaukee, how does that make me a tool?
Let's catch up a little bit. Since you're here, a lot has happened since you left this chair on the opposite side of you right now. Do you miss this world at all?
I leave it to really sharp young folks like you to sort it all out for us. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a challenging time for journalists, and you guys know this better than I do at this point. We are a very polarized, republic right now. We have people who just do not agree. And when we disagree, oftentimes the disagreement turns those we disagree with into enemies, rather than simply people we might have a difference of opinion with. So I think it's really hard. And I'm sure you get the feedback from people. I could see it, towards the tail end of my time here, where you would hear from people who would tell you they were not going to watch the show this week because they simply didn't like the guests you were going to have on, because it didn't line up with their politics. So I think it's it was challenging then, and I think it's sort of more challenging today. It's sort of exponential in terms of growth and that sort of polarization.
Yeah, I'm still doing work over in Marquette. You got a documentary, this documentary project. Any more projects like this?
I don't know. We have people. We did our first documentary, America's Socialist Experiment, about Milwaukee's past in 2020, and people asked us at that time, "Are you going to do another one?" And we said, "I don't know. We didn't think we had one in us." But we've done two now, and some people ask us whether we're going to do a third. I don't know. We have to talk to the team about that. I work with, and I do want to give a quick shout out to our team members, Lynn Sprangers and Andrew Triplett and Alita Mercer and Steve Betcher and Mike Trinkline. They were great. Would we do another one? I don't know. It'd have to be the right topic. We have some ideas, but this one took 3 years, so we better get going if we're going to do another one.
It is a fantastic film, A Fuller Education. You are always welcome back on this side of the chair.
Yeah,
Mike
anytime.
Gousha, fantastic to see you. Thank you for
So good
stopping
to see
by.
you, both of you guys, and you're doing a great job with the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Up next, the battle to be Wisconsin's next governor, plus the vice president in Wisconsin. We're on the ground in central Wisconsin, plus Marquette Law School poll director Charles Franklin is next.